Welcome back to another episode of Case of Interest Kohberger. This is our web series where every week we break down the developments in the University of Idaho murder case. I'm Newswatch 16 Stacey Lang from WNEP. This is an Idaho story that became a northeastern Pennsylvania story at the end of 2022 when there was arrest of a suspect, Bryan Kohberger, who is from Chestnut Hill Township in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. So we are following his prosecution every step of the way as we work toward a trial, which is for now scheduled for October of this year. But as we've discussed many times on this Case of Interest Kohberger, that could change as things progress. There are a few updates to talk about. Firstly, we are looking forward to Kohberger's next appearance in an Idaho courtroom, which is scheduled for this Friday, August 18th. It's at 10:30 in the morning in Idaho, which would be 1:30 p.m. Pennsylvania time. And we will have coverage of that hearing on the air and online on WNEP and WNEP.com. We're looking ahead to that. There are two things that are going to be discussed in that meeting. If I take you to the actual motion toward that hearing, for that hearing on the Case of Interest website, which we'll also link on WNEP.com so you can check it out for yourself. This bulleted list that's in bold is what they're going to be discussing in that hearing, which is a motion to compel, which is basically the defense asking the prosecution to share its evidence in pieces. This is the third time that they're doing that. The judge will consider that, and very likely that he will approve that. And then the big item is that second one on the list, defendant's second motion to stay proceedings. He wants to, Kohberger, I should say, and his defense team want to put the pause button on the proceedings to allow them to go through all of that evidence that's being handed over from the prosecution. There was a previous stay of, forgive me if I'm wrong, I believe 27 days earlier this summer. And now this is another attempt to stay those proceedings, which would then theoretically push back that October trial date. That's just some procedural stuff, not too out of the ordinary. There is a really interesting document, though, that was filed this week on the Idaho Court's Case of Interest page, where Bryan Kohberger and his defense team are submitting a statement and a resume from what we're presuming is going to be an expert witness for the defense. It's a woman named Leah Larkin, who's an expert in genealogical data. And I won't go through this whole document. It's 14 pages long, and it's very involved and very scientific. But if you're interested in genealogical science or have submitted your DNA to one of the big websites like Ancestry.com or 23andMe, it really gets into the weeds about how that works and what's allowed and what's not allowed. So you can kind of glean from this bulleted list, this numbered list that Leah Larkin has submitted to Idaho court, that one of the defense strategies in Kohberger's case is going to be to cast doubt on the DNA evidence against him. We reported it here on Case of Interest and on WNEP. That DNA evidence that the prosecution has against Kohberger is really convincing. We reported a few weeks ago that the prosecution says that the DNA found at the crime scene is let me pull up our previous story, was found to be 5.37 octillion times more likely to be Bryan Kohberger than anybody else. And we talked to a DNA expert from the University of Scranton, and you can check out that interview on another episode of Case of Interest, where he said that is extremely convincing evidence that this DNA can't be anybody else but Bryan Kohberger. But this statement from this expert witness that the defense plans to put up casts some doubt about how DNA that is collected just for the purposes of making a family tree on something like Ancestry.com and 23andMe, and there are several others, those are just the two biggest ones, isn't the perfect kind of DNA profile when it comes to forensics. And I have number 10 pulled up because that was really what jumped out at me when I read this document earlier today. It says that only two of the websites, not including Ancestry, 23andMe, and MyHeritage, allow forensic genealogy in their databases. So she's alleging that the prosecutors, or the police in this case, may have broken the rules to get the family tree that helped lead them to Kohberger in the first place, which we talked about in that previous story. Now, is it very possible that the police have a warrant and had a warrant to get that DNA and the defense just isn't aware of it yet? That's absolutely possible. But I just thought that was interesting. And it's definitely worth a read if you want to take a look at this document that's on the case of interest page. And again, we are paying attention for that hearing that will be Friday, August 18th at 1:30 our time. And we'll have coverage for you then. And we'll be back here to discuss whatever it is the judge decides. So thanks for catching up with us for another episode of Case of Interest.